I remember the first time he said it. We were sitting in his truck, parked just outside the bar we'd both pretended not to choose for each other. The night was warm, the air buzzing with that restless energy that makes you feel like anything could happen. He turned to me, his jaw tense, his hand gripping the steering wheel though we weren't moving anywhere. "I'm not gay," he said. Came out defensive, like he was daring me to argue, daring me to see him differently than he wanted to be seen. And maybe he thought I would laugh or call him out. But I didn't. I just sat there, watching him, listening to the quiet in the cab after his words landed between us like a stone. The thing was, I already knew. Or maybe it wasn't that I knew. Maybe it was just that I could feel it. The way his eyes lingered on me too long. The way his laughter softened when it was directed at me. The way his shoulders relaxed in those rare moments when he forgot to guard himself. He didn't have to tell me what he wasn't. I could see everything he was written across his face when he thought no one was looking. But that night, with the windows cracked and the smell of gasoline faint in the air, I didn't push. I didn't tell him what I saw. I just nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Okay," I said quietly. His shoulders dropped the tiniest bit, like he'd been bracing for a fight that never came. We sat there for a few more minutes, the silence humming between us, before he finally started the truck and drove me home. I should have left it there. I should have let his words be the boundary line he wanted them to be. But the truth is, when it comes to him, I've never been good at boundaries. The night he ended up in my bed, it wasn't supposed to happen. It never really is it? You don't set out to cross that invisible line, to rewrite the rules you've both been pretending to live by. It happens in small moments, in the quiet spaces where words fall away, and the only thing left is the heat of someone's skin and the weight of everything unspoken. We'd been hanging out more often, using excuses neither of us believed. He'd come over after work, grease still on his hands, his shirt clinging to him with the smell of the garage. I'd make dinner, or we'd drink beer on the couch, laughing about nothing and everything. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at me. Not in the obvious way, not in a way that most people would notice. But I noticed.
He noticed.
That night he showed up with a six-pack and a story about a fight with his brother. His eyes were stormy, his words sharp, but when he sat down beside me, his knee pressed against mine like it always did. Like his body couldn't stop reaching for me even when his mouth was busy reminding me of all the things he wasn't. We drank. We talked. The fight with his brother blurred into memories of our own, of late nights in the truck, of stupid adventures we'd gotten into when we were younger, of the kind of closeness that most people would have mistaken for something else. And maybe it was the beer, or maybe it was just that the weight of holding back had finally become too much. But somewhere between laughter and silence, he reached for me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the kind of kiss you see in movies where the music swells and everything slows down. It was messy, tentative, almost clumsy. His lips brushing mine like he wasn't sure if he was about to break apart or come alive. My heart hammered against my ribs, my body frozen in disbelief, and then kissed him back. For a second, he pulled away, his eyes wide, searching mine, like he was waiting for me to call it a mistake, to shove him back into the safe box he'd built for himself. But I couldn't, and that was it. That was all it took for the dam to break. We stumbled into my room, his hands trembling as they found my skin, his mouth desperate against mine, as if he'd spent years starving himself and finally allowed a taste. The words he'd spoken in the truck, "I'm not gay," echoed in my head, but they felt meaningless now, stripped bare in the heat of his breath against my neck, the weight of his body pressing me into the mattress. He spent the whole night in my bed. Neither of us slept much. We didn't talk about what it meant. We didn't talk at all, really. There was only touch, only the raw truth of two bodies tangled in the dark, saying everything we were too afraid to say out loud. And maybe that should have been enough. Maybe it should have been a perfect memory, sealed off from the rest of our lives, untouchable by daylight. But the morning came. I woke first, the light seeping through the blinds, painting his face in soft gold. He looked peaceful, younger somehow, like all the weight he carried had slipped off him while he slept. I wanted to reach out, to trace the line of his jaw, to memorize every inch of him. But then his eyes opened. And just like that, the peace shattered. The walls came back up, brick by brick, faster than I could even blink. He sat up, running a hand through his hair, his back to me. I waited for him to say something, anything, but the silence was louder than words. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, rough. This didn't happen. My stomach dropped. I wanted to fight him, to tell him that pretending wouldn't erase the truth, that whatever he wanted to call it, whatever label he refused to claim, it didn't change the fact that something real had happened between us. But I didn't, because the look on his face wasn't anger. It was fear. So I swallowed my words. I let him leave. I watched him walk out of my apartment without looking back, carrying the night with him like a secret too dangerous to keep but too precious to let go. And me? I was left with the ache of knowing I'd touched something fragile, something forbidden, something that might never belong to me the way I wanted it to. But God help me, I still wanted it. The days after that night blurred together, but not in the way you might expect. I didn't float around in a haze of joy, replaying his touch over and over like some blissful dream. No, it was heavier than that. Every moment was sharp, cutting. I felt his absence like a bruise I kept pressing on, just to remind myself it was real. I wanted to reach out to him, to ask if he was okay, to make sure I hadn't imagined everything. But I didn't. I knew him well enough to understand that the tighter you try to hold him, the faster he slips away. He needed space, and maybe I needed time too. Time to figure out what that night meant. Not just for him, but for me. Because here's the thing. When someone spends their whole life telling you who they aren't, it starts to mess with your own sense of reality. I knew what I felt. I knew what we shared. But the morning after, when he looked me in the eye and told me it didn't happen, I started to question myself. Did I push him? Did I want something he couldn't give? Was I building a whole world out of one night when, to him, it was just a mistake he'd spend forever running from? I thought maybe we'd never speak again. That seemed like the safest outcome. But he didn't disappear. A week later, he showed up at my place again. No six-pack this time, no excuse. Just him, standing in my doorway, his hands shoved in his pockets, his eyes darting everywhere except my face. "Can I come in?" he asked. My throat tightened. "Yeah." He walked past me, straight to the couch, dropping onto it like he belonged there, like nothing had happened, like we were just two friends killing time. But his shoulders were stiff, his jaw clenched. I sat beside him, waiting. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick, charged with all the things we weren't saying. Finally, he exhaled, long and shaky. "I don't know what's wrong with me," he muttered. Something in my chest cracked. "Nothing's wrong with you," I said. He shook his head, almost violently. "No, you don't get it. I'm not like that. I'm not like you." The words stung, sharper than I wanted them to. Not because of what he said about me, but because of the way he said it about himself, like he was broken, like the very idea of being like me was something he couldn't survive. "I don't need you to be like me," I said softly. "I just need you to be honest." His eyes finally met mine. And God, I swear, in that moment it was all there again. The longing, the fear, the war between what he wanted and what he thought he was allowed to want. Then he leaned forward, his hand brushing mine, tentative but undeniable. And just like that, we were back where we started. The second time was different. Less hesitation, more desperation. He kissed me like a man who'd been starving all week, like he tried to forget but couldn't. His hands knew where to go this time, his body finding mine with a kind of urgency that left no room for questions. And I let him. I let him take whatever he needed because I needed it too. Afterward, we lay there in the dark again, his breathing heavy against my shoulder, his fingers tangled with mine like he didn't realize he was holding on. I wanted to freeze that moment, to trap it in amber so it could never slip away. But when morning came, so did the walls. "This can't keep happening," he said, pulling on his shirt without looking at me. I stayed quiet, staring at the ceiling, because what was there to say? I already knew the script. I knew the push and pull, the way he'd reach for me at night and then shove me away at dawn. Still, the part that broke me wasn't his denial. It was the tenderness that slipped through when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way his fingers lingered a second too long when he handed me something. The way he'd rest his head back on the couch, eyes closing, only to lean ever so slightly toward me, as if my presence steadied him. Those were the moments that undid me. Not the heat of the night, not the urgency of our bodies. It was the small, almost invisible signs that told me, no matter how much he tried to deny it, he felt something too. Weeks turned into months, and what we had became this secret rhythm, a cycle we couldn't seem to break. He'd show up late, his excuses thinner each time. We'd pretend for a while, eat, drink, watch something we weren't really watching. Then the silence would stretch too long. The air would shift, and we'd find ourselves tangled up again. Every time I told myself it was the last. Every time I swore I wouldn't let him back in unless he could be honest about what it meant. And every time, the sound of his voice at my door, the look in his eyes, undid all my resolve. Because the truth is, I loved him, even when I knew better, even when it hurt. And maybe the cruelest part of all was that I think, deep down, he loved me too. Not in the way that was easy or simple or open. Not in the way that would ever let him say it out loud. But in the way his hand would find mine in the dark, gripping tight like he was afraid of being pulled away. In the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching, like I was the only safe place he had left in the world. But love that can't breathe eventually suffocates you. And as much as I tried to tell myself I could live in the shadows of it, part of me knew this wasn't sustainable. Sooner or later, something had to break. And it did. The breaking point came on a night that started like all the others. He showed up late, the smell of motor oil and cigarettes clinging to him, his eyes tired but restless. I'd stopped asking why he came, stopped pretending there was any reason other than us. We sat on the couch, some old action movie flickering on the screen, both of us pretending to pay attention. But I could feel it, the shift, that slow gravitational pull drawing him closer. His knee pressed into mine. His hand brushed my arm. His breathing grew heavier. And then, finally, he turned to me. I thought it would be the same as always. The kiss, the rush, the quiet surrender to something neither of us could name. But instead, he spoke. "I can't keep doing this," he whispered. The words cut through me like glass. "Then don't," I said, sharper than I meant to. His eyes flicked to mine, full of something I couldn't read, fear, longing, maybe both. He swallowed hard. "You don't understand. If anyone knew." I laughed bitterly. "If anyone knew what? That you're human? That you want what you want, same as everyone else?" He flinched. "Don't do that," he muttered. "Do what?" "Make it sound easy." His voice cracked. "Because it's not. You don't know what it's like for me." The room fell silent. And for the first time, I didn't rush to close the gap between us. I didn't reach for his hand, didn't soften my voice to make it easier for him. Because the truth was, he was right. I didn't know what it was like for him. I only knew what it was like for me. To love someone who kept building walls I wasn't allowed to climb, to give myself over and over only to be erased in the morning light. And I was tired. That night, he didn't stay. He left before the movie was even over, muttering something about work in the morning. I let him go without a fight, but when the door closed behind him, the silence was unbearable. I told myself I'd be done this time, that I wouldn't open the door again, no matter how many times he knocked. But of course, he did knock. Days later, there he was, standing in the hallway outside my apartment, his hair damp from the rain, his eyes wild and lost. "Please," he said, just that one word. And I hated myself for it, but I stepped aside and let him in. The storm broke in my bedroom that night, but not in the way it usually did. He wasn't urgent this time, wasn't desperate to erase himself in my skin. He was quiet, shaking. We lay side by side in the dark, the air heavy between us. Finally, he whispered, "I'm scared." I turned my head toward him. "Of what?" "Of you, of me, of what this means." He took a shaky breath. "If I let myself, if I admit it, then everything changes. And I don't know if I can handle that." For a moment, I didn't know what to say, because I understood more than he realized. Loving someone changes you, It demands pieces of you that you might not be ready to give. But still, my heart ached. I'm not asking you to have all the answers, I said softly. I'm just asking you to stop pretending. His hand found mine under the blanket, gripping tight, almost painfully. I don't know if I can. We lay like that for a long time. His fear wrapped around my hope, both of us suspended in the tension between wanting and denying. And then, as if the weight was too much to carry any longer, he pulled me close, his lips finding mine in the dark. It wasn't lust this time. It wasn't denial or desperation. It was something raw, something that terrified him. And me. It was love, breaking through despite everything. But love isn't always enough. Because the more nights we spent tangled together, the more mornings I spent watching him pull away, the more I felt myself unraveling. Every goodbye felt heavier, every denial sharper. I wanted him, all of him, not just the version of himself that came alive in my bed after midnight. I wanted his daylight, his laughter in public, his hand in mine without fear. And he couldn't give it to me. One morning, after another night of whispered confessions and trembling hands, he stood by the door, his face pale. I can't keep hurting you, he said. I froze. Then don't. His eyes filled with tears, though he wouldn't let them fall. You don't get it. I already am. And then he left. This time he didn't come back the next day. Or the next week. For the first time in months, my door stayed closed. The way silence can be louder than words. The absence of him filled every corner of my apartment. Every inch of me. I told myself it was for the best. That maybe now I could heal, could move on. But late at night, lying in the same bed where he once breathed against my neck, I couldn't help but wonder if he was lying awake too, haunted by the same memories. Because for all his denials, for all his words, I'm not gay, this didn't happen, I can't. I knew one thing for certain. He loved me, even if he never said it, even if he never admitted it to himself. And somehow, knowing that made it hurt even more. Time stretched in strange ways after he left. Some days felt endless, the silence in my apartment swallowing me whole. Other days vanished in a blur, like I was running from something I couldn't name but felt deep in my bones. I thought about calling him more times than I can count. My phone became this constant weight in my pocket, buzzing with everything except the message I wanted. Every vibration made my heart lurch, only to break again when I saw it wasn't him. But I didn't reach out, because part of me believed that if he wanted me, really wanted me, he'd come back on his own. And maybe, selfishly, I needed to see if I mattered enough for him to fight his fear. Took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of silence. 3 weeks of me convincing myself it was over, that he'd buried whatever we had and gone back to his life. And then one night, there was a knock at my door. I didn't move at first. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might tear itself out of my chest. I knew, before I even stood up, before I even reached for the knob, I knew it was him. When I opened the door, he was standing there, soaked from the rain, his face pale and drawn. His eyes met mine, and for once, there was no guard, no wall. Just rawness. I tried, he whispered. His voice cracked. I tried to stay away. I thought it would be better, safer. But I can't. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. He walked in, dripping water on my floor, his hands trembling as he rubbed them against his jeans. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Finally, he turned to me, his chest rising and falling like he was bracing for impact. I'm not gay, he said again. The words should have shattered me. But then he added, barely audible, but I can't stop loving you. Something in me broke open then. All the nights of denial, all the mornings of silence, all the times he'd left me bleeding but hopeful. It all came rushing back, colliding with the truth he could no longer hold back. You don't have to call it anything, I said quietly. You just have to stop running from it. For a long moment he just stared at me, his eyes wet, his lips trembling like the words he wanted to say were caught in his throat. And then he stepped forward. This kiss wasn't like the others. It wasn't tentative or desperate or forbidden. It was surrender. It was a man finally letting himself feel the thing he'd spent his whole life fighting. We collapsed into each other, his arms tight around me, his sobs muffled against my neck. And I held him, every part of me aching with relief and fear and love all at once. Because I knew what this moment cost him. And I knew it didn't erase the struggle, didn't magically make everything easy. But it was a beginning. That night he stayed again. But this time was different. There was still heat, yes, still the hunger of two bodies drawn to each other beyond reason. But there was also slowness, tenderness, the kind of touch that lingers not because it's forbidden, but because it's allowed. Afterward, he lay on his side, facing me, his hand tracing idle patterns on my chest. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. His voice was small, fragile. "I don't know how to be this." "You don't have to know everything right now," I told him. "Just stay. That's all I want." He nodded, his eyes closing, his breathing evening out as he drifted into sleep. And for the first time in months, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. But love, even when spoken aloud, doesn't erase fear overnight. In the weeks that followed, there were good days, beautiful days, mornings where he didn't rush out the door, where he lingered in my kitchen with coffee in hand, where his laughter filled the space like sunlight. Evenings where he reached for my hand without hesitation, where we shared pieces of ourselves we'd never dared to before. But there were hard days too, days when the weight of secrecy bore down on him, when a careless comment from a friend sent him spiraling, when he pulled away and I feared we'd unravel all over again. And every time I had to choose, do I fight for us, or do I let him go for his own sake? The truth is, I didn't have the answer. Maybe I still don't. But what I do know is this. The night he told me he wasn't gay, the same night he stayed tangled in my sheets until morning, changed everything. It cracked open a truth he could never fully bury again, no matter how hard he tried. And as messy as it was, as painful and complicated as it became, it was real. Real in a way that left me forever marked by him. If I'm honest, I sometimes wonder whether I should have walked away sooner. Whether loving him was an act of devotion or an act of self-destruction. Because for every moment of tenderness, there were moments of silence sharp enough to cut me. For every night we spent in each other's arms, there was a morning where his shoulders stiffened, where he turned back into someone unreachable. It's hard to explain what it feels like to love someone who is both entirely yours and not yours at all. It's like holding water in your hands. You feel its weight, its coolness, its life. But no matter how tight you squeeze, it keeps slipping through your fingers. And yet I couldn't let go. One night, months after that first confession, "I'm not gay, but I can't stop loving you," we drove out to the edge of town. He liked to clear his head there, where the stars stretched endless above us and the city lights faded away. We sat on the hood of his truck, a six-pack between us, the silence almost comfortable. He tilted his head back, staring at the sky like it might hold the answers he couldn't find in himself. "Sometimes I wish I could just be normal," he said. My chest tightened. "What does normal even mean?" He shook his head. "Not this, not us, not feeling like I'm split in half all the damn time." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that what we had was real, that it didn't need a label, that love in any form could never be wrong. But looking at him, at the pain carved into his face, the weariness in his eyes, I couldn't. Instead, I reached for his hand, slowly, gently, out in the open under the stars. He flinched at first, glancing around like someone might see us in the empty dark. But then he let me, his fingers laced with mine, tight, like he was holding on for dear life. And in that moment, I realized something. He wasn't broken. He wasn't lying when he said he wasn't gay. Maybe the truth was more complicated. Maybe he didn't have the language for what he was. Maybe he didn't want to claim one. But that didn't matter. What mattered was this. He loved me, in his own messy, terrified way. And maybe that had to be enough. But love that hides always leaves a shadow. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while he slept soundly beside me, wondering how long I could survive in the in-between, wondering if I could keep waiting for him to be ready to live openly, or if I'd eventually break under the weight of secrecy. Because I wanted more. I wanted to hold his hand not just under the stars at the edge of town, but walking down the street in broad daylight. I wanted to kiss him goodnight without fear. I wanted to be part of his real life, not just the hidden one he carved out for me in stolen hours. But every time I thought about saying it, about asking for more, I looked at him, and the fear in his eyes stopped me. So I stayed quiet. And silence can be its own kind of prison. The last time he spent the night, it wasn't like before. We didn't rush into each other, didn't let the fire consume us. We just lay there, side by side, the quiet heavier than usual. I could feel the words pressing against my lips, begging to be spoken. I need more. I can't keep doing this. Choose me or let me go. But I didn't say them. Instead, I turned on my side, pressed a kiss to his shoulder, and whispered, "Stay." He didn't answer, but he didn't leave either. And maybe that's all we were ever capable of. Staying just enough to keep the ache alive, but never enough to set it free. Sometimes I catch myself replaying it all. The truck rides, the late-night beers, the trembling kisses, the mornings that hurt more than any goodbye. And I wonder, was he the love of my life, or just the lesson I needed to learn? Maybe he was both, because he taught me something even in all the heartbreak. He taught me that love doesn't fit into neat little boxes, that it can be raw and confusing and terrifying, and still be real, that sometimes the people who say I'm not gay can love you more deeply than the ones who shout their pride from rooftops. But he also taught me that love, without honesty, can leave scars deeper than silence. And I carry both truths with me, even now, even still. I don't know when exactly I realized it was ending. There wasn't one single moment, no dramatic fight or slammed door. It was more like the slow unraveling of a thread, so gradual you don't notice until suddenly you're left holding nothing. We still saw each other here and there. He'd come over, we'd eat, laugh, touch. But it was different. There was a distance in his eyes, a heaviness in the way he moved. And I was tired. Tired of being his secret. Tired of waiting for a version of him that might never arrive. Tired of giving so much of myself only to wake up to the same walls every morning. One night, after another round of half-hearted kisses and silence that stretched too long, I pulled back. "We can't keep doing this," I said. He froze, his face pale, his breath catching in his throat. "Don't say that." "I have to." My voice broke. "Because it's breaking me." For a second, I thought he'd argue. I thought he'd fight for us, say the words I'd been aching to hear for months. But he didn't. He just sat there, staring at me, his jaw clenched, his eyes glassy. Finally, he whispered, "I'm sorry." And that was worse than anything, because sorry meant he knew. He knew what he was doing to me. He knew what we were to each other. And still he couldn't or wouldn't give more. The days after that conversation felt eerily familiar, like returning to the silence after our first night together. Only this time it wasn't temporary. This time the absence wasn't a pause, it was an ending. I missed him in ways that felt physical. Walking past the couch where he used to sit, smelling coffee in the morning and remembering the rare times he stayed long enough to drink it with me. It was like touching a bruise over and over. And yet, underneath the grief there was something else. Something like relief, because for the first time I wasn't waiting. I wasn't clinging to the hope of a knock at my door or a whispered confession in the dark. I was just breathing, hurting, yes, but also healing. Months went by. I filled the space he left with friends, with work, with long walks through the city at night. But no matter how much distance time gave me, he lingered. And then, one evening, I saw him. I was leaving the grocery store, arms full of bags, when I spotted him across the street. He was standing outside a bar with some coworkers, laughing, a beer in hand. For a moment, I couldn't move. It was like seeing a ghost. He looked the same: messy hair, grease-stained jeans, that same crooked smile. But he also looked lighter somehow, like a man carrying less weight. Our eyes met across the street, just for a second. And in that second, everything rushed back. The truck rides, the whispered confessions, the way his hand clutched mine in the dark. But then he looked away, his laughter returning as he turned back to his friends. I stood there, frozen, my heart hammering, my groceries digging into my palms. Part of me wanted to run to him, to demand answers, to beg for something more. But another part, the stronger part, knew it wasn't mine to demand anymore. So I walked away. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the boy who once said I'm not gay and then spent the whole night tangled in my sheets. I thought about how much I loved him, how much I still loved him in ways I probably always will. But I also thought about myself, about how love, as powerful as it is, can't thrive in shadows forever. About how wanting someone doesn't mean you have to lose yourself to them. And maybe that's the hardest, most heartbreaking truth of all. You can love someone with every fiber of your being, and still have to let them go. Do I regret it? No. Because for all the pain, for all the nights I cried myself to sleep, for all the mornings I watched him walk away, I also remember the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. I remember the way his hand found mine under the stars. I remember the night he broke and whispered that he couldn't stop loving me. Those memories are mine. Untidy, imperfect, but mine. And I hold them the way you hold something fragile, knowing it can never last forever, but grateful it existed at all. I used to believe that endings were supposed to be clean, that when two people stopped loving each other, or stopped being able to choose each other, the story simply closed. Tied up. Done. But what I learned with him is that love doesn't end just because it can't be lived out loud. It lingers. It seeps into the cracks of your life, into the quiet spaces where memory is stronger than presence. He was gone from my bed, my couch, my mornings, but he was still everywhere. I'd hear a song on the radio and remember the way he hummed under his breath, off-key but earnest. I'd pass by a garage and swear I smelled the mix of motor oil and cigarette smoke that clung to his clothes. I'd sit in my apartment on a Friday night, staring at the door, half expecting the knock that never came. He haunted me, but not in the way ghosts do. More like the way a scar haunts you, a reminder of pain, but also of survival. Months rolled into a year. I didn't see him again, and in that time I started to heal. Slowly, painfully, but surely. I learned how to live without waiting for him. I dated a little, stumbled through awkward first conversations, let other men's laughter fill the silence he once claimed. But still, no matter how many faces I met, a part of me compared them to him. To the man who once told me I'm not gay and then clung to me like I was his lifeline. It wasn't fair to them. It wasn't fair to me either. But grief doesn't play fair. One evening, about a year and a half after we'd last spoken, I got a message. Not from him. From his brother. Hey, just thought you should know, he's moving out of state. Got a new job. Wanted to say goodbye to everyone, but I don't think he had the guts to reach out to you. I figured you'd want to know. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling, moving away. For a long time, I sat in silence, debating whether to call, to text, to run to him before he left. The thought of never seeing him again, never hearing his voice, never having the chance to look him in the eyes one last time, it broke something inside me. But then I remembered the way he looked at me that night, whispering, "I'm sorry." I remembered how every time I let him back in, I lost another piece of myself. So I didn't reach out. Instead, I whispered goodbye to the empty room, hoping somehow, on some level, he'd feel it. People like to talk about closure like it's something you can choose, like it's a door you can close if you just slam it hard enough. But with him, closure never came. And maybe that's okay, because not every love story is meant to resolve. Some are meant to live unfinished, to linger in the spaces between what was and what could have been. He will always be that for me. The almost, the could have been, the love that existed in whispers, in shadows, in nights that felt like forever and mornings that felt like loss. Sometimes I still dream of him. In the dreams, there's no fear in his eyes. No walls, no apologies. Just him, laughing, smiling, reaching for me in the daylight like it's the most natural thing in the world. And when I wake, for a few seconds I believe it's real. Then the truth floods back in. But instead of breaking me, it softens me now. Because I know I was loved. Even if it was imperfect, even if it was hidden. And that matters. It may not be the kind of love I could build a life on, but it was love all the same. And it shaped me, changed me, taught me what I deserve and what I can't survive without. So if you ask me who he was, I'll tell you, he was the man who said, "I'm not gay," and then spent the whole night in my bed. The man who kissed me like he was drowning. The man who held my hand in the dark but couldn't face the light. The man who loved me. Quietly, painfully, but truly. And though he's gone now, though our story will never be complete, I'll carry him with me. Always. Because some loves, no matter how impossible, never really leave you.